To continue this series of dangerous creatures, in this video we'll be going over the most dangerous creatures you can encounter at the CR3 rating. And just a reminder, the CR level of a monster is balanced around 4 players at around that level fighting at once without magic item. And at number 10, we have the Basilisk. The Basilisk has the flavor text in its journal, which states that no one carves statues of frightened warriors. If you see one, keep your eyes closed and your ears open. As the Basilisk only has one trait, and that's its petrifying gaze, where if a creature starts its turn within 30 feet of the Basilisk and they can see each other, then you have to make a DC 12 Constitution saving throw or else become incapacitated, which means your speed becomes 0 and the Basilisk will have advantage on its attacks against you. Then at the end of your next turn, you're able to attempt the saving throw again, and if you fail, you get petrified and turned to stone. Now, the petrified condition is nasty, as you basically become incapacitated, where you can't move, speak, and you're unaware of your surroundings. Plus a whole bunch of other combat conditions, like attacks against you have advantage, but you have resistance to all damage. So it just fully takes you out of the fight once you're petrified, and the petrification applied by the Basilisk is permanent, unless someone has greater restoration to remove it from you, or some other kind of great magic. So if you encounter a Basilisk at level 3, which is the level appropriate for fighting a Basilisk with a full party, chances are, if you get petrified, that's it for your character. The petrified condition also increases the weight of your character by 10 times, which makes it real hard for your allies to move your body, if they want to bring you back to town in order to find someone to fix your condition. And if your entire party is just very unlucky with constitution rolls, there's a chance a single Basilisk can petrify your entire party rather easily, since it doesn't require any actions on the Basilisk part in order to accomplish this. You can avoid looking at the Basilisk by just turning your gaze, which effectively gives you the blind condition against the Basilisk, but you can still perform the attack action while blinded. There's just a lot of spells and stuff that you can't use when you can't see a creature. So it's not impossible to fight a Basilisk without looking at it, but you always have to run the risk of possibly losing your character if you do decide to look at it. And if not, then you have disadvantage on all your attack rolls. The only saving grace of the Basilisk is that it's kind of slow with only 20 feet of movement, and its one action doesn't really hit that hard, as it only does around 17 damage on average. Whereas the average damage per round for a CR3 creature is supposed to be 26, so it's well below the average. Now, the only reason the Basilisk is low on this list is basically because it's not that hard to counter the petrifying gaze, and a DC 12 Constitution check is not that difficult to overcome, especially since you get 2 times to try it. Unless you literally have a negative Constitution modifier, which is not a good dump stat for any class. So the Basilisk makes this list purely for its special ability, as its damage is not much to write home about, and definitely has one of the most dangerous special abilities of all the CR3 creatures. All the other creatures that beat this on the list are a lot more battle focused, and deadly when it comes to dealing damage. And at number 9, we have the Dolgaunt. This is a creepy looking aberration, which makes it on this list for its rather high single target damage, as it's able to dish out an average of 30 damage per round. The creature's multi-attack allows it to attack 4 times, 2 times with its tentacles and 2 times with its unarmed strike. And its tentacle attack has a 15-foot range and auto-grapples on hit. And also, if the Dolgaunt is grappling a creature, it's able to replace any of its tentacle attacks for a Vitality Drain, which deals 2d8 necrotic damage on a failed Constitution save, and heals the Dolgaunt for half of the damage. What makes this especially good is just the staying power of being able to heal while attacking provides. If it's able to successfully land 2 of its Vitality Drains, then it can heal up for around 10 health per round, without having to sacrifice any damage, as Vitality Drain actually deals more damage on average than its tentacles. Although Vitality Drain does require a failure of a pretty easy Constitution save, at only DC 11, but unless it's trying to drain from a ridiculously high Constitution target, like maybe a frontline Barbarian, generally, it's worth the use of Vitality Drain over Tentacles anyway, because the potential damage and healing from Vitality Drain is better than what Tentacles can put out in damage. And it also has a 40-foot movement speed, so it's able to close into tentacle range pretty easily, and it has blind sight, so it's great against invisible targets, and even has evasion, so it has some advantages against a lot of spell saving throws, where it takes no damage if it succeeds a dexterity saving throw, where it has a +4 to that dex. If a Dolgaunt gets a drop on a party with its +6 to its stealth, it can easily take out a party member before anyone gets a chance to do anything, with its pretty high single target burst damage, which it can do consistently every turn, while also healing itself slightly. It even has a higher than average AC at 16, with the average AC for a CR3 creature only being 13. So despite having pretty low health at only around 33 on average, it should actually be pretty hard to take down with its high AC, evasion, and that little bit of self-healing it does each turn when it deals damage. And while there are a couple of other CR3 creatures which can deal slightly higher single target damage, the reason the Dolgaunt is on this place over some of them is mainly because of its other combat advantages. In addition to its heal, it just makes it slightly more dangerous, as the Snow Golem can also deal the same amount of damage, but it only has 10 feet of movement and a built-in weakness. The Githyanki Warrior definitely gives the Dolgaunt a run for its money though, as it can deal about the same amount of damage as well while having 1 more AC, and the ability to Misty Step 3 times a day. But the Dolgaunt also has sufficiently high AC, has control with its grapples, and with its range and movement speed, it's actually pretty maneuverable. And at number 8, we have the Giant Scorpion. This is a beast which deals the second highest amount of single target damage at the CR rating. Well, kind of third, but we'll talk about that later. Clocking in at a grand total of 41 damage on average. And it is absolutely the king of single target damage at this rating, without requiring legendary actions or special abilities. It also has 20 more health than the Dolgaunt, only 1 less AC, the same movement speed, and also has 60 feet of blind sight. Although, it has no other special abilities, and it requires a target to fail a Constitution saving throw in order for it to take the maximum damage, as a lot of that damage is definitely tied to its Sting ability. The Scorpion is able to make 3 attacks with its multi-attack, 2 claws, which both can grapple on hit, and the Sting, which only deals 7 damage on application, but then the target also has to perform a Constitution save, where on failure, they'll take 4d10 poison damage, or only half as much on a success. So the Giant Scorpion has some control of those grapples, while also just doing a ton of damage with that Sting. The Giant Scorpion is also just one of the best wild shapes for Circle of the Moon Druids to turn into once they gain CR3 creatures, because a Giant Scorpion can also outdamage CR4 and 5 beasts as well. The Giant Scorpion is kind of a monster when it comes to its single target damage, and can easily down pretty much any 3rd level player in 1 round of combat, if it's able to land all 3 of its attacks. Although that's only against 1 target, which is why it's a little bit lower on this list than all the other ones that are higher up, which are able to affect more targets and can potentially wipe out an entire group by themselves within only 1 or 2 rounds of combat. Although not the next spot. The next part on this list is the last one, which is here purely for single target damage. Kind of. And what's the best place to use these dangerous CR3 creatures to kill your party? How about with a beautiful fold-out map? The Moonlight Maps Kickstarter includes over 100 fold-out maps with great environmental art and are dry erase, so you can draw and clean away easily. And also some of the encounter cards, which are incredibly detailed with what goes into the particular encounters, including suggested monsters to fight for almost every level, in addition to them being corresponded to some of the maps so you can better use the encounters. Having foldable maps that are pre-gridded is just very convenient for tabletop play, as it saves you a lot of prep work as a DM while also giving you cool looking maps to play on, which are rather big too. So make sure to go check out the Kickstarter, a link will be in the video description. The maps and encounters look great, and now to continue on with more dangerous monsters to populate your battle maps. And at number 7, we have the Fleecemane Lion. This is one of the few CR3 creatures which has legendary actions, which allows it to perform one of its actions after a player's turn in combat. And with one of its legendary actions, it's able to make a claw attack. So if you count the lion's multi-attack using its legendary action, perform the claw attack 3 times, then it's able to barely outdamage the Giant Scorpion in single target damage with 43 damage on average. Which really goes to show just how strong the Giant Scorpion is if the Fleecemane Lion requires 3 legendary actions to barely match it in power. Although the Lion also has a couple of other benefits. It's straight up faster with 50 feet of movement speed. It can pounce things in order to knock them prone and then gain a bonus action bite. It has the spell turning ability, where it has advantage on saving throws that target it. And if it succeeds a saving throw on one of those spells in its 4th level or lower, then the spell's reflected back at its caster. So if you try something like Toll the Dead on a Fleecemane Lion, chances are it will be returned back to you, which is really good spell protection. So it can easily get into melee range to perform all of its attacks, and if you don't get away, then it can just use legendary actions to claw you. Or if there are no targets within melee range, it can use its Roar legendary action in order to make everyone afraid, which is probably a good way to open up in combat as well, since the fear condition is a pretty nice debuff to put on a group of enemy players, as it basically gives them disadvantage in all their attacks against the lion. Now, there are other creatures at the CR3 rating which are able to perform legendary actions as well, but none of them can match the lion or the Giant Scorpion in terms of single target damage, even including the legendary actions, which is why there'll be no more legendary action users on this list. And at number 6, we have the Hell Hound. The Hell Hound has the Fire Breath action, which has a pretty short range of only a 15-foot cone, the same as Burning Hands, but deals as much damage as a 4th level Burning Hands, clocking in at around 21 damage on average to each target. So its single target damage with Flame Breath is more damage than the Basilisk Bite, and even the bite of the Hell Hound itself, which is only 14 damage on average. So if the Hell Hound is able to position its Fire Breath to hit all 5 adventuring party members, if they're bunched up for whatever reason, then it's able to deal a potential 105 damage to a whole party on average, which is definitely more damage than what a giant scorpion is able to put out in one round. That's kind of the power of just having abilities that can hit multiple targets though, especially when it hits those multiple targets as hard as 66 fire damage. Of course, this is assuming everybody fails the saving throw, but chances are they'll take less than 105 damage, but it's still a pretty significant amount. The Hell Hound itself is also really fast with 50 feet of movement speed, so it's able to easily position itself for a perfect fire breath, especially since all Hellhounds are immune to fire damage, so they don't care about hurting their allies in case there's other similar creatures nearby. And since Hellhounds rarely hunt alone, chances are there might be another Hellhound too, trying to position fire breaths to hit as many targets as possible. So if you really want to kill a party of level 3 players, just send 2 Hellhounds after them, and they'll quickly burn through most of them with their fire breath. And while their fire breath is recharging, they have pack tactics, so there's a good chance they'll be able to land their bite attacks. Although definitely the power of the Hellhound is just that fire breath, as it's one of the hardest hitting AoEs that a CR3 creature is able to put out, which is not from a spell. And at number 5, we have the Blue Dragon Wyrmling. This Wyrmling has a Lightning Breath ability, which deals 22 damage on average to each target it hits, and shoots out in a 30-foot line. So it's a little bit easier to hit 2 targets with this than it would be with the cone of the Hellhound, depending on the situation. Although Lightning Breath only hits slightly harder than Flame Breath, and they both don't have super good radiuses on how they deal their damage. So what really puts the Blue Dragon Wyrmling above the Hellhound is just its movement speeds. It has 60 feet of fly speed, so it's a way better position itself in order to get the perfect Lightning Breath, and it also has 15 feet of burrow speed, which means it could instead just hide underground after it uses Lightning Breath, so that it has full cover and it just waits for it to recharge. So the Blue Dragon Wyrmling can pop up from the ground, shoot its Lightning Breath, and then just hide again without having to stay out in the open for attacks. Although outside of its Lightning Breath, its one bite attack hits for even less damage than the Hellhounds, so it's really kind of useless outside of a Lightning Breath. But its Lightning Breath is good enough, with its movement speed, that it's definitely slightly more dangerous than the Hellhound. As if you're able to hit a full party of adventurers who are lined up for whatever reason, then they can deal a grand total of 110 damage to those 5 players. Although even hitting just 2 people will match the damage of a giant scorpion who lands all 3 of its attacks. And at number 4, we have the Sahuagin Warlock of Ukotoa. This is a spellcaster mob who's able to cast a spell, Hunger of Hadar, once a day. This is an AoE spell which fills up a 20-foot radius sphere with blackness and bitter cold, which makes the area difficult terrain, and any creature who starts their turn inside of it takes 2d6 cold damage immediately without any save. Additionally, if a creature ends their turn in the area, they have to succeed a dexterity saving throw or take an additional 2d6 acid damage. So assuming a full party of adventurers is not able to escape a Hunger of Hadar for a turn, then that's 70 average damage to 5 players, which technically isn't as high as Lightning or Flame Breath from the previous 2 spots, but it's much easier to actually deal all this damage since the radius of Hunger of Hadar is huge, and the difficult terrain makes it hard to get out of. In addition to the Warlock just having some other useful spells, they can also cast Counterspell once a day, go invisible, or even use Crown of Madness in order to take control of a hard-hitting melee player character. Although the melee and defensive capabilities of the Warlock are nothing to write home about. It has lower average hit points and doesn't hit particularly hard in melee with its multi-attack. It's definitely a powerful caster that wants to stay in the back line, and deals the most amount of its damage with its Hunger of Hadar ability, which can be very deadly if comboed with just any other melee creature to keep them in the area longer. As Hunger of Hadar lasts for a minute, just as long as they're able to keep concentration, so it has the potential to just deal more and more damage, while it blasts people with Eldritch Blast from range on subsequent turns. And at number 3, we have the Anchorite of Talos. This is another spellcaster creature, as I've been grouping all these different types of creatures together, that way half the list isn't just spellcasters, as spellcasters are just very strong, especially ones that are able to perform 3rd level spells like a Lightning Bolt. Lightning Bolt hits harder than the Lightning Breath ability from the Blue Dragon Wyrmling, and also has a much longer range of 100 feet. If Lightning Bolt is able to hit 5 party members, then that's 140 damage on average to everyone, which is definitely more than what a giant scorpion can put out in one round. Although positioning Lightning Bolt to hit 5 targets is almost impossible. This is more of a theoretical damage example. Although when it comes to theoretical damage, this creature is very good at putting out tons of damage. Although its other abilities aren't much to write home about, it can also use Blast and Thunderwave, and it can transform itself into a boar. Although just a normal boar, so it's not that big a deal. The main reason it takes a high spot is because it can just use Lightning Bolt, which is strong enough to take down 3rd level party members that it hits pretty easily, because just a single target damage of Lightning Bolt is more damage than the average damage for a CR3 creature in a round, at 28 damage per target hit. And when it comes to no-name characters who can cast spells, there's only 2 others which are also able to use Lightning Bolt. One of those will be talked about later, the other is the Green Hag, but only if the Green Hag is part of its coven, which means it has its 2 other party members within 30 feet of it. Without its coven, it can't use Lightning Bolt, and isn't really that dangerous when compared to all the other creatures on this list. However, the Green Hag can also cast Polymorph when it's part of its coven, which is a pretty powerful control spell but not super useful at low levels, because the best you could use it for would be to turn yourself into a giant scorpion, or to try and transform one enemy target into a small little creature to keep them out of the battle. And there's a lot of other control spells you could use instead that don't require 4th level spell slots. Polymorph is a really good spell to have at level 7 for a player when they're able to learn that spell, but not super useful at low CR ratings for creatures who have it, since it's actually kind of easy to counter if you just break their concentration, and they can't really turn into something super scary. And at number 2, we have Portentia Dran. This is a named NPC which has the ability to shape change, and turn into a humanoid or beast that has a challenge rating equal to its own. But also it gets to keep its game statistics and abilities, which means it can turn into a giant scorpion, and then sneak attack, to bring its potential single target damage up to 55 on average, making it the hardest hitting creature at this level if you use that combination, and if it actually works. I'm not 100% sure on the rulings on whether this works or not, since Portentia's sneak attack does not function like a player's sneak attack, and only requires it to hit with a weapon attack that you have advantage on, or that's within 5 feet of an ally, rather than requiring you to hit with a weapon that specifically has the finesse property. And the natural attack of a beast counts as a natural weapon. So, I'm pretty sure that counts as the weapon necessary in order to proc Portentia's sneak attack, if you want to min-max it by turning into a giant scorpion, which is obviously what we're doing for this video in the most dangerous NPCs to make them as dangerous as possible. So if a Portentia turns into a giant scorpion and has sneak attack active, then that's enough damage to down pretty much any 3rd level character in one round. Now, when it comes to named NPCs, they're usually a lot stronger than other characters at their CR rating, so I lump them all together rather than having the whole list being taken up by named characters. And when it comes to single target melee named characters, which are especially dangerous, there's also Rosie Beestinger, who's able to make 5 attacks with her bolty attack, which averages at around 36 damage if they all land. And Rosie can also teleport into darkness or dim light, and has the ability to cast the darkness spell once a day. And there's also Sapphic Caltro, who's able to deal 26 damage on average with his multi-attack, but also has the ability to Misty Step 3 times a day in order to bonus action teleport near any target at once, and can regenerate 5 health each turn, which also allows her to resurrect even if he's at 0 hit points. And he has an impressive 75 hit points on average. So Sapphic is able to hit hard, teleport into range to do damage, and is incredibly hard to take down since it has a very high health and the regeneration trait. And also, I played the module in which Sapphic is from, and that module sets it up in a way where it's possible for a 1st level party to face off against him, which can easily result in a TPK, and is also the reason why the early levels of Rime of the Frost Maiden is very difficult. And at number 1, we have Derro Savant. Now, I'm not 100% sure if this is a named NPC or just a spellcaster NPC, but it is a very powerful CR3 creature that's able to cast Lightning Bolt, and it's able to use it more than once per day as it has 2 3rd level spell slots. They can also use Blink or Invisibility in order to escape any situation, and has even some more AoE with its ability to upcast Burning Hands, or Control with its Sleep spell. It's also not as squishy as most spellcasters with almost 50 HP, slightly more health than the Hell Hound, which is also a pretty beefy creature as well. And it also has magic resistance, so it just has advantage against all saving throws for spells and magical effects, which is a trait usually found on boss level creatures. There's also another spellcaster, which is actually a named NPC that I should probably talk about here, called Walnut Dinkgrass, which is a 7th level spellcaster and has the ability to cast the spell Blight, which is a 4th level spell that deals a lot of single target damage, which is about 36 damage on average if it actually lands. which is still less than a Giant Scorpion's multi-attack, but it also has a couple of other AoEs and utility spells, including Call Lightning and Moonbeam. Walnut may be the strongest named NPC caster at the CR3 level, but I think the Derro Savant might give it a run for its money, just because its spells are a little bit better for destroying a party of 3rd level characters, and it has the really good magic resistance trait. Alright, and that's it for the video. Honestly, I think some of the top spots from the CR2 video are a little bit more deadly than some of the top spots from the CR3 video, mainly because some of them just have access to better 3rd level spells. Anyway, if you have any ideas for future videos just like this one, I'd love to hear about them down in the comments. I'm always on the lookout for good ideas to turn into videos.